I grew up in the television age. I was born in 1958. So all my life has been about television, which specializes in single narratives. And in the main, television specializing in single narratives which are defined by Western commerce. In other parts of the world, those narratives are defined by governments. So those are two powerful institutions that control TV. And I began to think that maybe what was going to happen in the future was something really dramatic, which is as the Western economy grinds to a slowdown, if you like, and as social media emerges as a method, an affordable method for lots of people in the world to get engaged in a global story, we're going to see the end of that kind of monoculture. And in fact, Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, once looked to the future and said, you know, I'm really worried about this because all the diversity of the world, the great places that I visited in the world as an anthropologist are going to go away and be replaced by a monotonous single global culture. I don't think that's happening. It's also true that the idea of globalism was created by Theodore Levitt, and he was an economist. And we attached cultural value to what was fundamentally an economic observation. So if I said to you, what is your world? It would be the people that you know. But when I say global, it is simply a mechanical description of the economy or an air traffic route or something like that. So this has all been very interesting to me. And I'm somebody who has had the incredible fortune of working with some very good, inspiring, creative people, and not least of which is this gentleman called Chris Rainier, who's a photography friend. And I began to realize that the people who were most interesting on my journey were the creative people I was meeting around the world. It was the photographer or the writer or the filmmaker who had put themselves through all the hard work it takes to become a professional. And in fact, if you're interested in this subject, there is a website called majorityworld.com, and you can see these people telling their own stories and describing the world as they see it through the lens of their camera or through their video camera or through their writing or whatever. And from those stories written by the people or made by the people who live them as professional creative people, not just random people posting videos to YouTube, but as thoughtful professional people, they're revealing more about the world than you could possibly imagine. And so I learned more about people by talking to these guys than I'd ever learned from market research. And I began to think of this as a concept. And I've called this concept Beyond Global. And it's going to circle back round to our own country at the end of this presentation, because Beyond Global is beyond a very specific idea. The idea that we're becoming a single global entity, a single thing. When in fact what's happening out there is that these technologies are bringing the various voices in the world to everybody else. This is a very, very significant moment in history. In fact, I think it's more significant than any media revolution, certainly in my life, and that I can remember. So when you hear stories from the stage about influence and things like that, this is part of what I'm describing. It's a world that's going beyond global, beyond monoculture, to a world of very, very, very many voices that you can tap into and you can learn from. But I want to go back for a second to that conversation I had in Tokyo. This is a lady called Alice Miles. Mothers die horribly in front of their sons. Small girls are turned into prostitutes, small boys into beggars. I hope it won't spoil the feel-good surprise if I tell you that one particularly sadistic scene shows a young boy having his eyes burnt out with acid to maximize the profits of street begging. Charities working with street children in India seem unaware of any instances of this, although Save the Children emphasizes that similar violence against children by beggar mafia is well documented. It's a pretty horrible description of, do you know what film they're talking about? Slumdog Millionaire, Slumdog film. And you know, I love that movie. I really liked it. I thought it was very, very human. It was a feel-good movie. It was very popular. I think it did well at the Oscars. And so this is a shocking retelling of that story to somebody like me who just went to the cinema and enjoyed a great movie about Indian kids. But actually, it's illustrative of a problem that we have, which is we sit in this very powerful media narrative, oblivious to the narrative of others. And when I think about beyond global, I don't think only of that as beyond the shores of America to other places. I mean in this country as well. Who is actually participating in the media narrative within which this entire audience is sitting? This photograph I picked up purely for this presentation, and I typed in to Google one word. That word was Lagos, one of the biggest cities in the world. This photograph was from the image section on Google, about 3 photos down. And to me, it speaks directly to the kind of narrative we impose upon people. And this gentleman that I met in the line at Tokyo from the Philippines, and in fact, quite a few of the people I spoke to in Dakar would tell me that this is the kind of photograph that they can make money off. So when the phone rings and a media company, notably an international media company, wants to buy an image from a local photographer, this is what they want to buy. And local photographers call it poverty porn. You've seen it. Starving children in the hands of their mothers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're getting increasingly angry about this. So here we have a professional class emerging in the world in places like Nigeria, and they are excluded from the global market for media because they're being excluded by Western-dominated large organizations. I don't know who the photographer is for this, but I'm going to show you some other photographers in a minute. But it's quite difficult for these people to get their images purchased so that they can make a living by even National Geographic. So I was interested in what we can learn from that, and I began to explore. So with my friend Chris, I've put together a large group of photographers from around the world, and they're all about 25, give or take. Some of them are here in the United States. They're all people who have put themselves through some kind of college. Not a single one of them has been to Cal Arts or Berkeley. They've typically gone to whatever is the best college for them to go to. And they've scrapped away and they've somehow got the equipment. And what's really amazing to me is they now have access to us. We can actually see their work. As I say, if you go to majorityworld.com, you'll see a lot of this work. This photograph also was taken in Lagos, Nigeria, and makes up the portfolio, or one photograph in the portfolio of this gentleman, Akintunde Akinleye. I hope I've said that name correctly. And he entitles his selection of photographs The Inner Life of Lagos. Those are yellow, I think those are locusts or crickets. And I'm not saying this is not a story about, there are bad stories and nice stories, and we should only tell the nice stories. This is a story about how if you went to meet this gentleman and spent some time with him, or asked him to investigate a subject for you, he would bring you insight that you have never had before. And it may challenge the way you think about his life in Nigeria, but actually, very interestingly, it challenges the way you think about your own existence and your own life here in the States and the work that you do. The work I found was far more powerful than lots of the work I was seeing when I was in corporate America. I'm particularly amazed by this woman. Nusha Tavokalian is from Tehran. Her work, which looks like this, is so provocative politically that it's been banned in Tehran. Happy young women at a party. I don't know what the party was. But again, if you look up her work on the internet, you can see her work. It was taken down from an exhibition at the United Nations at the insistence of the Iranian embassy. But it's a perspective that we don't normally see about Iranians. I've seen stories about Palestinians, Israelis. This is not a political conversation. It's about the fact that if you really want to understand the world, there are many people out there ready to tell you the story. This is Farzana Wahidi, and this is somebody from Kabul. Again, if I said Kabul, what are the images that come to your mind? No, there's a load of young photographers, videographers, storytellers ready to connect with you to bring different stories from Afghanistan. And so that whole notion that Twitter talks about global consciousness is not only 140 characters. It's about very skilled storytellers bringing to the world the kind of skills and beauty and capabilities that we would really want. And they tell different stories. This is Ahikam Sari, This is a view of the Middle East. I butcher these names because I have no skills with language. But Ahikam is Israeli. So there's this kind of interesting thing that happens when you look at this work and you meet these people. You find these commonalities, our human commonalities. That's not a romantic notion. They do exist. But you see incredible diversity. And you see a way of telling stories and a way of feeling about the world that you've been denied because we've been living in this incredibly powerful televisual monoculture. And I believe that social media, as well as being exciting for all the things that we've heard about so far today, is also changing the way the world tells its stories. And that our story is only one of many. I've not met this gentleman. This is Terrell Jermaine Starr. I loved his self-description. He's a native New Yorker from Detroit. Here was this kind of native New Yorker, and I really wanted to begin to understand who was excluded from the mainstream narrative here in the United States, and how could I engage with this. And so here's just my chosen example. And he took this photograph, which I really, really loved. Now, obviously, this is the Occupy Wall Street movement that has no goals. Have you noticed? Has no goals, doesn't want anything. It's just occupying Wall Street. And so everybody whose narrative is about we all want something doesn't know what to do with this because they don't want anything. In fact, my favorite story about Occupy Wall Street was all these young people meditating. That's all they were doing. They were just meditating. And the police have got all the riot gear on and they have not a clue what to do because they don't want anything. It's a different narrative. It's one of many. So I got really excited by this. I've spent a lot of my career buying market research. I spent an inordinate amount of money on it. And there are very good market researchers, but they are few and far between. And I realized that if I wanted to hire Terrell, and I looked at my budget for 5 focus groups, I'm sure he would do an extraordinary job for the amount of money it would cost. If I wanted to go and understand about what was that Occupy Wall Street thing, what story would you tell to my clients about Occupy Wall Street, I'm sure he would tell a more interesting story as a professional, not a crowdsourced, user-generated person, but as a professional storyteller who's invested his creative energy. And so I was talking to a friend earlier on before I came on stage, and I think I realized that what I'm really trying to articulate is that out there in the world there are people who have genuine creative insight. And we've tended to ignore them in favor of the mechanics of market research or data. And all of those things have their place. But unless you're listening to the real powerful storytellers, you'll never really understand the world. And we should be hiring people like this to do our marketing campaigns, to provide our photography, not simply because we've got some kind of, well, we need to give them a break, but because their work will be better. And it will resonate more clearly with the people we want to connect to. I love this photo. I'm going to send it to my father. So Beyond Global is about a new professional class of creative people. It's not confined to an old elite Western institutions, whether they be politics or business. And if you've noticed, every single one of those old institutions is now in significant collapse, whether it be the presidency of the United States or the collapse and kind of half-hearted rebirth of the American motor industry. It's not confined to old elite Western institutions. I grew up venerating National Geographic. I still love National Geographic. This is not a ding against National Geographic. It is simply only one narrative, and there are many others. Helping the world see more clearly. My discovery, certainly for myself, was by engaging with these professionals, by listening to them, by asking them the questions I had. I literally lost that sense of lostness I talked about earlier on and became once again enthralled with the world. And this kind of experience I constantly have of being out there traveling, which I do a lot, and then coming back here is really depressing to me because when I come back here, people are sort of down, whereas out there they're not as down. It's kind of interesting. And creating a colorful world of many voices, which may sound like a Manchester boy who's gone native in California because he does yoga. But actually, an amazing world that is colourful and full of many voices is more interesting than a monotonous world with only a few voices. And when you have a look at the way brands and advertising and everything works, it does reduce the sum total of stories in the world. And I think we're going to start to see new companies, whether they're young tech startups here in the States who have a healthy disrespect for that old world of marketing, or whether it's Asian companies, Indian companies, Brazilian companies. They're not going to subscribe to the same thing that we subscribed, and they're going to bring these voices all the way here to the United States. So that's my little story. I recommend you go and have a look at majorityworld.com. And as you go on this journey, if you're interested, and some of you may be, think about a future where the world is very different culturally to the world that it currently is. It's not about old institutions and old habits using the new technologies of social media. It is about new voices shaping the world that our children will grow up in and affecting the businesses that provide our livelihood. And I, for one, think that's incredibly exciting. Thank you for giving me the time.